Hello everyone and welcome to an Outlast Trials dive into the lore of Dr. Easterman, the director of Project Lathe and a senior researcher in the Signala facility. I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts and opinions on the subject, and of course, if I miss anything, feel free to comment down below. But without any further delays, let's talk about what we know of Dr. Easterman. Starting before his involvement with the Murkoff Corporation, Dr. Easterman is contacted in 1953 on January 12th by Jason Lawler of the CIA, who speaks to him about brainwashing and how it's infiltrated the popular imagination, and asks him that they seek the answer to the question, why would anyone choose to become a communist? Shortly after seemingly accepted Lawler's offer, we see documents of Dr. Easterman is studying Jung, most likely Carl Jung, a Swiss psychiatrist, psychotherapist, and psychologist that we will discuss more later on in the video. The reason why Dr. Easterman accepts this job, however, is that Lawler speaks of Dr. Easterman's brother and how he ended his own life. Dr. Easterman seems confident that his brother wouldn't do anything like that if not for brainwashing, most likely from the Korean enemy, stating that the forensics were sloppy and that many strange things happened during war. Lawler gives Dr. Easterman his opportunity to learn more about brainwashing by sending him to Hong Kong, where they are holding KPA, or Korean People's Army brainwashing subjects, and need him to investigate. On 1953, February 9th, we see a private letter from Easterman as he informs he's now arrived in Hong Kong. He's writing to his wife, Irene, telling her to burn this letter once she has read it. Clearly, something that did not happen. He writes her a bit of small talk, the weather, the state of the city not meeting his standards. He continues with how well the facility is built for his research, and that he's able to find more evidence about his brother Stanley's death, having interviewed 4 veterans and 1 Lutheran minister who were all prisoners of war of the Korean People's Army. Though he has yet found solid evidence of specific psychological programming, though he notes the degree of trauma is truly impressive. One of these people he interviewed is Private Ramus, an American prisoner of war and alleged victim of Korean brainwashing. Dr. Easterman drugs him to try to extract information, but instead accidentally creates the Skinner Man, a hallucination that, along with the drugs and trauma, inevitably puts this man in a catatonic state. On 1954, April 19th, Dr. Easterman makes his first contact with a member of Murkoff Corporation, Olivier Barenzik. He introduces himself to Dr. Easterman via letter as the Assistant Director of Behavioral Medicine at Murkoff's Mount Massive Hospital, mentioning to Dr. Easterman on how Jameson Lawler has been sharing his findings in Hong Kong under the appropriate discretion, and how his research synchronizes with dream therapy that their labs in Los Alamos study. Barenzik mentions securing agency cooperation to bring him to Los Alamos to meet their team of researchers, having already put tickets and flight documents on his bedside table. Furthermore, pushing that he accepts this invitation as it's highly sensitive to national security, and that even without his participation, it could represent a security risk requiring to enforce a form of silence. On 1954, April 30th, Dr. Easterman enters into his private journal speaking on the comparisons of New Mexico to Hong Kong. He's reviewed Dr. Wernicke's notes, how if they were alone in this study, he would categorize him as delusional and irreparably damaged by the guilt of his participation in Nazi Germany. He sees Dr. Wernicke's work of guided visual stimulation to be a joke, comparing him to a mesmerist. Dr. Easterman, though, notes receiving strange dreams and sees him now as vital and handsome, almost as if brainwashed himself, flipping opinions in a single note. In a personal journal entry of Dr. Easterman on 1955, August 25th, he mentions self-administering small doses of lysergic acid, a precursor for lysergic acid dithalamide, or LSD. This also is not the last time we hear of Dr. Easterman's drug use. He speaks of charisma, belief, and how he's been burned by the sun, calling his wife and asking her to find Julius Firmicus Maternus, a Roman Latin writer and astrologer, on his bookshelf, but states she could not or would not. Here is when he mentions his research of Jung and the phallus of the sun, quoting Animo decinis per obum solis tributor, which translates to, To this spirit, the descent through the orb of the sun is attributed. The phallus of the sun is a concept that has appeared in various contexts, most notably in Jungian psychology and in interpretations of ancient mythology. Due to so many mythological texts and further studies of Jung that we'll discuss further later on in this video, Jung interpreted this vision as evidence of the collective unconscious, being the reason Dr. Easterman seems so fascinated by the subject. Dr. Easterman sees the sun as our only rational God, it being the center of all life, and yet when looked upon, it would mean blindness. He sees that for a person to be truly transformatively charismatic, they must be unknowable and lethally dangerous, and that to look upon them would be to make yourself go blind. Continuing in his journal, this is when he discovers a vital piece of Project Lathe. Reading a Bible in a soldier's locker, he discovers that charismatic authority overpowers legality, tradition, and dignity. St. Paul saw that charisma could only be gifted by God, but Dr. Easterman sees that humans are clay, and the brain is the most vulnerable to be sculpted. He seeks to make charisma into a product. He seeks to make charisma into a weapon. Here is where Project Lathe is born with the help of Clyde Perry gathering prime assets, those who exude this charismatic authority, though this version does eventually collapse. We see that around 1958, the project seemingly collapses due to using Mount Massive's patients, what we now know as the XPops or experimental population, in place of the reagents, and a number of deaths occur. On 1958, July 12th, Dr. Easterman mentions how Scarfiati, the architect and engineer for Signala, is conspiring against him and trying to use it as evidence of Dr. Easterman's incompetence. Dr. Easterman knows that these assets are hard to come by, and if Project Lathe collapses, then they'll be liquidated. With the collapse of Project Lathe, this is seemingly also the first time we see Dr. Easterman having his authority questioned and causing him to unravel to a paranoid state. His mask seemingly slipping a bit from a composed scientist to a man scrambling to maintain power. But in failure, Dr. Easterman learns of a way to improve his project and develops the next stage. As of 1958, July 13th, he states how two things must change. He requires meaningless test subjects, neither damaged and broken mental patients, nor charismatic killers. Dr. Easterman wants those who are the opposite of special. The other being he must be absent, powerful, benevolent, and mysterious due to his absence and can't mix with the test subjects. During the project's collapse, a correspondence of Dr. Easterman is filed on 1958, July 18th, to Baranczyk, speaking of ways to salvage the project. Aside from the creation of psychotics and all the resources being at Signala already, he mentions a discovery during an autopsy of a lathe subject. It revealed strange tumor-like growths in the parietal lobes. The parietal lobes are primarily responsible for processing sensory information. This suggests a more precise form of operant conditioning. Shortly after, he enters in his private journal on 1958, July 23rd, speaking of no correlation between stimulus and lesion growth, and that only one consistency that's even close to interesting are the shared visions of the Skinner man. He describes it as a Jungian nightmare man zeitgeisting his way through the test subjects, but he states that it isn't science. Carl Jung being brought up once more, but not for the final time. He writes another letter to Baranczyk, most likely out of panic, to get a response to show something of the original Project Lathe so that he can continue, and states that parietal lesions formed just as expected, allowing the precision of a so-called cortical homunculus, and thus allow Murkoff or any client to set predetermined behaviors into the subject's very brain. This all leading up to the Project Lathe we now know in the Outlast Trials. To insert any idea of belief into a person's mind, to truly brainwash someone into doing any action with them being the devil on their shoulder. As of 1958, August 25th, the Murkoff Corporation's board, along with the agency partners, authorize Operation Project Lathe 2, noting that limbic aggression therapy will now be known as latent agency therapy. To continue funding, however, it will require a minimal sharing of results with MK Ultra, MK Delta, and MK Naomi, MK Ultra being a human experimentation program overseen by the CIA for the purpose of researching and developing drugs and procedures for interrogation and mind control. The other projects are most likely very similar in nature. On 1958, September 4th, we can read a conversation between Moses Scarfiati and Dr. Easterman, further discussing the redesigning of Project Lathe 2. Dr. Easterman states they aren't creating a behavior, but a complex, further elaborating that a psychological complex as a story. It's pain combined with a story, and relates it to that of someone being burned by a cigarette. That person will quickly learn to fear a smoldering cigarette, and their behavior will change to avoid cigarettes. Tacking on that if your mother whispers, "I love you, but the donuts are making you fat," while burning you, then you won't have learned a behavior, but you'll have a complex. He further explains that it's an absurd example, but with all these factors of this beautiful woman you see as your mother hurting you, that what does your unconscious brain link to the donut? To which Scarfiati laughs. Dr. Easterman stating he can see the complications now. Scarfiati, though, seemingly catching on, that they will need to add the complications with contradictory objectives. Justice through lies, love through punishment, faith through absurdity, and mercy through violence. Dr. Easterman ecstatically confirms just that. With extreme contradictory taboo, it strips everything of meaning, leaving a blank place to instill precise psychological complexes. On 1958, September 17th, Dr. Easterman writes in his journal that Baranczyk insists he shares his test results with the paperclip team at Los Alamos, especially that regarding the Skinner Man. A frequently haunting and tormenting figure for reagents and an unexpected side effect of Project Lathe's mental conditioning. Many believe this to be a representation of Dr. Easterman, as a reagent called it Dr. Skinner. Dr. Easterman doesn't believe this, though, as he feels the reagents see him as a father, and they've come to love him. Yet again, his mask slipping, his image of being a father is being twisted into that of a monster for the reagents, and he wishes to ignore it. Fast forward a few years as most of Project Lathe goes just as planned. Further funding is given, and additions to the projects are even added with Project Geister and Winter Kills. We move to 1960, January 3rd. Dr. Easterman suffers from a 3-day hangover and wonders if one can be so bad that it causes his hair to fall out. He's paranoid about Avellanos and Scarfiati ruining his work. He continues about how he met Sidney Gottlieb, who is well known for his drug use and his work of MK Ultra. Dr. Easterman even stating Gottlieb was using LSD and treating it as Holy Communion. This loss of hair, however, for Dr. Easterman will be the beginning of his descent to madness. A second entry on the same date, Dr. Easterman discovers thallium in the pocket of his work coat. Thallium is highly toxic and can cause various health issues, including neurological damage and a number of other symptoms, eventually leading to death if not treated. He states that it's the same coat he passed out in after the New Year's party. A little more than a gram, and wonders if it's Gottlieb's idea of a prank. Scarfiati or even Miss Barlow, the nurse the reagents speak to for prescriptions. This clearly flaring up his paranoia, and for good reason. Someone could have wanted him killed. Though he doesn't worry about his life, only his hair, and begins treatments of Prussian blue. 3 days later, the board asks Dr. Easterman to test a compound for Gottlieb, and he's not sure if they're mocking him. Avellanos, though, tells him he seems blue, which she doesn't find to be a coincidence. Generally, Prussian blue doesn't turn one blue, though if mixed with liquids or meals it can stain your lips and mouth to a tint of blue. We'd have to assume, though, that Dr. Easterman does not actually show these traits, and Avellanos is in fact pushing his buttons, perhaps even the one who caused it. Around the arrival of Franco Barbie, Dr. Easterman enters in his journal dating 1960, February 3rd, and further considers Franco's totem, his totem being that of his gun, Lupara. Feeling there is an undeniable psychic pressure being emanated from the barrel, he has a junior scientist hold the empty weapon against Dr. Easterman's head until it lost some of its power, repeating the procedure with a loaded gun, then loaded and cocked, and states it felt strongest when he was on his knees with the barrel against the back of his skull. The junior scientist refused to put the weapon into Dr. Easterman's mouth, which infuriates him enough to want that scientist moved to clean up, a punishment of sorts. A day later, he enters into his private journal again about the smell and taste of cordite, and that the rim of the barrel having a metallic taste, whether it be blood or some alloy of copper and iron, stating how it's too large to fit comfortably in his mouth, but the pressure was not unpleasant. Following that, he needed a few minutes to make himself presentable again afterwards, most likely due to feeling some sort of sick pleasure from this. He feels the power of the gun's charisma, seeing the twin barrels like eyes, and this will seemingly imprint on Dr. Easterman as he finds it difficult not to repeat the process again. Dr. Easterman is clearly falling apart, and even states how he's become exhausted due to the constant need to evolve with the reagents. This, along with the thallium poisoning and his constant drug use, could be the many reasons he's seemingly losing his sanity and becoming more unraveled, as we just read with his encounter with a loaded Lupara. With his use of drugs, as he's known to use, this could be enhancing his already deteriorating psyche, but it only gets worse. During Project Countdown, a trial modifier that attached a timed explosive to the reagent's chests. On 1960, March 27th, Scarfiotti and Easterman request the engineer that works with the reagents, Noakes, assistance to make it work smoother. There's a bit of back and forth, but Dr. Easterman says his wife always says, "Don't let the perfect get in the way of the good," being interrupted by Scarfiotti saying, "ex-wife." This confuses Dr. Easterman, as at no point is he made aware of a separation. A day later, he enters in his private journal that he apparently divorced Irene 6 months ago, and he has no memory of it. There are holes in his memory, terrifying gaps, stating Irene divorced him for grotesque negligence, and he willingly divorced her. She states he hasn't spoken with, seen, or even corresponded with her in years, which from the documents we've gathered, only one is a letter to his wife, though this could be due to lack of importance, or the truth that he became so caught up in Project Lathe that he began to forget about his wife Irene entirely. In early documents, he states about missing her, but for most documents, she barely comes up. This drives Dr. Easterman into even further madness, rage, and even questioning himself. Dr. Easterman's psyche only further delves into paranoia and anger once Amelia escapes. As of 1960, April 17th, he enters in his private journal on how Scarfiotti's involvement with Amelia's co-conspirator is everywhere, that he's even mentioned by name, Moses, which, in Scarfiotti's defense, the co-conspirator was mentioning the biblical Moses, and how he didn't just escape himself, but saved everyone, much like Amelia. Dr. Easterman, though, sees this as a clue, a sign of the co-conspirator hinting at his involvement. He quickly changes the subject to not looking into the mirror, most likely due to his declining looks from the thallium poisoning. He believes, though, that Scarfiotti is plotting with Amelia to ruin him, deepening his paranoia. On 1960, April 21st, Clyde Perry, Scarfiotti, along with Murkoff security, break down Dr. Easterman's office door, as he has been absent for some time, where he is discovered nude and covered in blood and excrement, which is assumed that both are his. He is found in a drug-induced state of his own volition, rambling about the sun, the Skinner Man, Joel, a biblical prophet and author of the Book of Joel, and a pillar of smoke, most likely speaking on the presence of God. After restraining him, Clyde returns to hunt for Amelia. After a few days, Dr. Easterman seemingly improves. He writes about feeling cleansed, quoting a passage of Joel 2:30. Wonders in the sky and on the earth, blood, fire, and columns of smoke. He sees the reagents as his children and that his work and family are falling apart, and compares himself to the column of smoke. He no longer sees himself as a father, a man. He sees himself now as the very presence of God. Skipping forward, as we've covered bits of Dr. Easterman with Amelia's escape along with her recapture, we return to the subject of the phallus of the sun. On 1960, June 12th, Dr. Easterman writes how he stares down the sun and his reward is he can look himself in the mirror again. Hairless, dead, and reborn. As we've talked about in the Project Diarchy lore video, he mentions Emil Schweizer, who became known as the Solar Phallus Man, studied by Carl Jung. This gives shape to Jung's early reflections on the concept of the collective unconscious. This seemingly being Dr. Easterman's metamorphosis of a man who sees himself ascended to a godlike state. He sees himself in the mirror as the sun with this phallus, a force to be reckoned with after having punished Amelia for her transgressions against him, and seems to have been reinvigorated and rewarded for it, and prepared to do much more to other reagents. There's a lot to unpack after so many years of Dr. Easterman's personal journal entries, and theoretically more to go, but something I didn't cover is that of Dr. Easterman's brother Stanley, and their family life as children. On 1955, October 14th, Avellanos and Lawler have a conversation that Dr. Easterman's brother had 2 prior attempts of ending his own life. Their mother hid it from Dr. Easterman, and they both had medical records for acute localized alopecia. That is until they left home. It was caused due to their mother yanking small patches of scalp out by the hair, a discipline used regularly in their household. Dr. Easterman does find out about this though, as it's documented on 1960 April 18th, some 5 years later, and one of the many things that drives him over the edge of madness. He finds out most likely due to the documents that were being leaked throughout Signala, the same documents the reagents gather Dr. Easterman does as well, though he sees them as lies with no further information if he ever finds these documents hiding a sliver of truth as of yet. This also gives us a bit of an idea on why he is so concerned about his hair rather than his life when he received thallium poisoning. He most likely sees it as a form of punishment from when he was a child. Dr. Easterman, though a man too proud to admit it, is under the same psychological complex that he talked about before with the donut with Scarfiotti. To lose his hair is the same as when he was a child and being disciplined by his mother. The only thing we don't know is what she could have whispered to him. He's broken past his complex though, at least for now, as Dr. Easterman's journey is not done. Will Dr. Easterman eventually become the final prime asset in our trials? Will we ever really see a full appearance of him, or will he fade into obscurity with someone in fact overthrowing him and ruining his life's work? That is all I have for now, but in the meantime, let me know your thoughts and theories as I'd love to hear them. Let me know if I missed any details, and don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date on future videos. Some videos being Let's Plays, some being these lore and theory videos that will be posted at least once a week. Don't be afraid to let me know some other subjects you'd be interested in seeing either, and hopefully, I see you all in the next video. See you then.